Okay.
I think they're on, aren't they?
Look that way again. Speak to the gods. Okay. Okay. Yeah, okay, great. Cool.
I know, yes. No, I'm
And is this around the pricing people who are taking up the sustainability options?
yes, I manage the Energy Communities Initiative in Westmeath,
Yeah.
and then I coordinate it. So I manage the mentors in the Midlands.
No, I was talking, I was dinner,
Oh, very
the
good.
IBEX. Because I'd gone in and seen it during COVID. We had a long stretch on the opposite chronic population cases.
So Ruth Huggy would be my boss in the CAI. So she heads up, she's the program manager then for community. So she would kind of coordinate us
I
all.
might have met her, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. No, no, they've appreciated this program going since 2015.
Sure.
They've appreciated the importance of and it's grown with nearly 700 sustainable energy communities throughout the country at the minute. So it's growing every day. We have a target of 1,500 by 2025. So we're growing steady and growing. Yeah, no, it is.
And do you anticipate them increasing?
Oh, definitely. We were just saying there, it's a hard if we can't
Vincent, how are things going?
They're going great, but exceptionally busy. Well, I wouldn't say
I'll ramble if I don't.
Yeah, I know exactly where you're coming from, so I just got to decide which page
Okay.
that I start
Good
on.
evening, everybody. Good evening. Can I have your attention, please? Listen, on behalf of Technological University Shannon, we'd like to welcome you all here tonight. Right? We believe this is a very topical subject. Right? When we start looking at the whole idea of energy, right, and how energy is going to impact our rural communities. So hopefully tonight we'll have a very interesting discussion on the future of energy and rural communities. So I'm going to invite Tim Hayes from the European Commission representation in Ireland to facilitate the evening for us. Thank you, Tim.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. And again, I welcome you all here this evening, those of you here in person and those of you who are watching online. This is one of a series of events that the European Commission representation is hosting before Christmas. And we think that energy is really important and a topical subject. So we actually were here to get the message across about what the European Prior to this, he was Chief Executive of the Labour Relations Commission and Director General of the Workplace Relations Commission. He was also a former General Secretary of the Association of Secondary Teachers in Ireland and the Irish Federation of University Teachers. So he's acted as consultant with the European Union and the International Labour Organization on matters related to public management. So as I say, Kieran is from quite close to here. He's native of Roscommon, graduate of UCD, and holds an honorary doctorate in law from the NUI and from UCD. He's also honorary professor of the School of Management at Queen's University in Belfast. Next to Kieran is Dr. Isabel Donnelly, and she's Senior Energy and Environmental Engineer at ORS and a Coordinator for Sustainable Energy of Ireland Communities. So she's currently the Regional Coordinator and County Mentor with ORS and SEAI. She also is involved in a number of community projects around Ireland. She researches energy efficiency and renewable energy. She's an expert coordinator to the European Innovation Programme, focusing on sustainable industrial crops. Her PhD is in bioenergy and agronomy from UCD. She's passionate about community-owned renewable energy, associated local employment, and how communities can have sustainable local circular economies. And our final speaker this evening is Professor Vincent Conan. So he is the inaugural president of the Technological University of the Shannon, which is where we are at the moment. And that's from the 1st of October 2021. So previously he was president of LIT, where he joined in September 2016 from IT in Sligo, where he'd been president since 2014. Before that, he was Chief Executive Officer of Shannon Development until its merger with the Shannon Airport Authority to form the Shannon Group. Again, before that, he was Vice President of Research at the University of Limerick, where he also lectured and researched. So he's an internationally renowned researcher in the field of physical electrochemistry. So what we're going to do now is we're going to listen to a presentation from each of the panelists, and they're going to go to the podium here, and they're going to speak for about 7 minutes on their chosen subject. We haven't determined in advance what it is that they want to speak about, so I really have no idea what they're going to say. But we hope that it will encourage you in the audience and the people listening at home to think a little bit about energy and the possibilities, and in particular, what we can do for the future. So we have up here the Slido. If you've used Slido before, you can ask a question on Slido. So if you just log on to that site, you can actually ask a question. And what happens then is that the questions go over here to the colleagues from European Movement Ireland, and I'll get them on my phone, and then we'll ask the questions from the members of the panel. But that will happen after the introduction that they've got to make. So I'd like to call on our first speaker tonight, so please, Kieran, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tim, for your kind invitation to address you this evening. And I'm delighted to be back in the new university, Technological University. When I was here, I was a member of the board in AIT, but I'm delighted with the development. It was a long gestation, but it has been worth the delivery in the end. As Tim said, no guidance was given on what we should speak about tonight, so I've decided to concentrate on industrial disputes between 1980 and 2010, just for the delectation of the audience.
Sorry.
Sorry. Oh, wrong theatre. So look, I really am pleased to be able to talk about an issue that has been very close to my heart over the last number of years. When Richard Bruton appointed me as Just Transition Commissioner on a part-time basis, I think it was largely more for my industrial relations skills rather than any knowledge I may have had about Just Transition, or indeed about developments in the Midlands, and indeed the closure and the difficulties arising from the very regrettable closure to some degree and the impact in 1 year of the closure of Loughree and West Offaly power stations. As Tim has indicated, I was only born 25 kilometres from here, and I have to declare a conflict of interest. As a young boy, I did work on family bogs, and I can't say I was delighted about it. It was back-breaking, excruciating work, and I and my brothers hated every summer having to go to the bog. But that was the situation they were then, long before the Industrial Revolution and mechanisation. However, it did give me a knowledge and understanding when I did come to do Just Transition, to some degree about the impact, particularly on the communities here in the Midlands, and particularly in Longford, Westmeath, Offaly and Laois, of the impact of the immediate closures of those plants, which were put out for about 10 years to close 10 years hence, and we had to achieve the totality of that project within 12 months. And I'll come back to some aspects of that. When I was born in the early 1950s, the world population stood at 2.7 billion. The carbon in the atmosphere was 310 parts per million, and the remaining wilderness in our world was approximately 64%. By 2020, by way of contrast, the world population is now 7.8 billion. Carbon in the atmosphere is 415 parts per million, and the remaining wilderness in our universe is now only 35% and decreasing. So that extraordinary contrast in a short period of life, literally a generation, is going to be mirrored with greater rapidity over the next 10 to 20 years. And we now need to take the action, and hopefully are taking the action, that would preserve this world of ours in whatever way we can for future generations. 2022 saw extraordinary weather patterns. And some of these were forest fires on a grand scale never seen before. Flooding levels that have been unseen for centuries. Crop and farm fruit failures and infrastructural damage on a wide scale. We in Europe thought these were issues and developments that only happened in third world or developing countries. All of those matters I refer to and more happened in Europe in 2020. And following on what Tim said earlier in regard to why now the impetus on energy and energy climate change and energy saving and renewable energies, it comes apart from the climate change agenda and the various COPs and World Climate Conferences, but more immediately from the aggressive war in the Ukraine. How much an event in the continent of Europe can change things and change thinking that we have never been able to achieve before. If there's any outcome of that, is the fact that Europe has now woken up to the issue of renewable energies and security of supply. It's like water. So much of our life depends on these two sources, energy and water. And these are the two issues all our wars, if there are to be wars, are going to be fought upon. When I was a young student and young in my career, there was an Iron Curtain through Europe. Anybody who had visited, and I did, Eastern Europe, and I saw the wall in Berlin, would have seen the impact of the Second World War. Night and daily now, we're seeing similar levels of activity and destruction being rained down on the people of Ukraine. Global warming is an existential threat to existing and future generations, and is rapidly compounded by our failure to take the global community action which is needed to stop and reverse this headlong rush to destruction. Time and time we do have our conferences, international and global conferences. We will have one again shortly in Egypt. But we're not taking the dramatic steps that are necessary on a world scale to prevent this destruction. Changes, I believe, start with communities. They start in our own villages, in our own towns, in our own cities, in our own islands and in our own countries. National societies need to act together. And we, as a part of a national society within Ireland and within the European Union, forces us to act in a concerted manner and in a united manner. Never more than ever have we needed a European response as part of a global response. And I think very much in the last number of years, the European Union has begun to step up to that particular challenge in addressing the issues that we need to address, not as individual nations, but as collective nations within Europe. and to influence other societies globally, and particularly in Asia and in North America, that these remedies are necessary now and not in the future if we are to arrest the destruction of our planet. At a more parochial level, I dealt with the fallout of the closures of the 2 power plants in this particular region. The impact on the community, and I've chronicled it in 4 reports I made to the ministers over the 2 years, was major. Number 1, it was the historical heritage of being lost in the context of what had sustained the communities in the Midlands for the best part of 70 years. That had sustained those communities, created employment, nurtured families and children, and the first initial elements outside of Dublin of social housing. They are landmarked throughout this region. Secondly, in context of working on just transition, I was astonished when we did launch the Just Transition Fund, the level of applications we received in a multiplicity of fronts, from community to enterprise to heritage to small enterprise development. The talent, the knowledge, the imagination in the area, in the regional area of the Midlands, was heartfelt, heartwarming, and very encouraging. So much so that after a torturous evaluation project some of you might have been involved in, we have approved 60 projects and managed to raise the initial 10 million to 30 million of government funding for those projects, most of which are up and running. We had the small incident of 2 years of COVID, which had a particular additional shutdown, as you know, in the Midlands. But they are up and running. I'm very hopeful of their success, and I hope they will be developed throughout this 2022 into 23 and extended hopefully into 2024, which is under discussion. To follow all of this is also 84 million coming from Europe as part of the Just Transition Fund, most of which I will be advocating be spent in the Midlands, but on larger scale projects, of which energy and renewable energies, I hope, will be a centre of attention, apart from creating employment in the region on new green enterprises. We did approve a number of projects, and I just want to mention them here tonight, and they are available on the website. Some of them have even gone up into YouTube. But I did recommend in my first report in December 2020 that the Midlands be made a particular target for renewable energies, given the history of the plants here in the region. And of course, the continuing one in Edenderry in 2023, which biomass plant, 50%, which has to apply for further planning permission in 2023, I hope will be successful. Maybe in the context of our need for energy security, we will have a more benign view as to what needs to be achieved and done. But I did say in my first report that we needed not to abandon Loughree Power based in Lanesborough or West Offaly in Shannon Bridge, that to some degree, even though we are required to decommission the plants, which has been done, do we need disestablishment? I raised the question. But I did say in Lanesborough it should be made a centre for renewable hub activity. That is still under consideration. Secondly, in regard to Shannon Bridge, I hope all is not lost, and it may, given our demand now for new energy, emergency generation, that it wouldn't be a turf producing, obviously that is not possible, energy generation plant. But there are other opportunities within that plant that will allow us to meet maybe our new energy emergency needs. I can't go further into that because that's a prerogative of the government and the minister, but I would hope there would be some further generation capacity. Of course, battery renewal is a big particular part of this particular region under Loughlune Energy. I also said in my earlier report that we should be very, very conscious of the security energy needs that may come down was a bit prescient in that. I didn't anticipate the Ukraine war. Nobody did. But secondly, that I always am of a view, having experienced it in the past in my industrial relations career, that sometimes we close places unnecessarily, and that we should build upon the heritage and skills that are within it, develop those, train up, and start using those plants for other activities. We don't always need to destroy them and rebuild somewhere else. So in a sense, I'm hoping that a considerable number of the heritage centres throughout the region, the old warehouses, the old factories, would be sustained. One other area I did point to was the strong history in the Midlands that has developed from the 18th and 19th century with our canal system, which was the main form of transportation and business, and which is very clearly alive and well in the Midlands, that those facilities continue to be used. Apart from that also, that there would be supplemented, I know they're for heritage and tourist purpose, but that we don't really have within the Midlands an interconnected system of public/private transport. What is more adaptable now and more possible than having electric vehicles trans-crossing the Midland regions with all the vibrant towns, all the old merchant vibrant towns in the Midlands, some of whom are rich actually, not alone in industrial development, but in factories that have been provided, manufacturing and services over the years by both Enterprise Ireland and the IDA. And of course now we have a second university in the Midlands to prop up Maynooth University, should I say, or to, I don't know, the challenge still goes on. But the point I was making that young people in this region need to have a source of education to prolong their third level education. But secondly, an opportunity to live and work in the Midlands and stop this daily commute to our cities, be it Galway, but more particularly Dublin. 25,000 people a day before COVID commuted to Dublin. Think of the lost time, 2 hours to get there, 2 hours to get back, and all the fossil fuels we were using to do that. So we need to think more creatively. One other issue I did point to in my report, which caused a bit of unease, was what I call the sclerotic system of public planning in this country, where if we are not alone in housing, but particularly now in the renewable energy space, how long it takes from concept to investment to our planning system, be it local authority planning, on board Planola, EPA, and then the courts. It takes us an awful long time to get any project from inception to delivery. And thankfully now the government are addressing this planning framework logjam. But it is an impediment to our future development of renewable energies, both wind farms on the island, other methods of and wind farms off our coasts. If we are serious about energy security, we must tackle these issues as a matter of urgency. And what is the existential crisis? We've already been warned by EirGrid and the regulator that the potential exists for electricity shortages this winter and to come. The UK Energy Authority, our equivalent EirGrid, said very specifically in the UK that there will be winter shortages now and to come for a number of winters. And they even predicted that these shortages may be from 4 to 7 in the evening with outages. We don't do planning well sometimes in this country. We are reactive to issues. We don't think ahead. We used to, but we don't now. And that is true of housing, of health, of education. I've been frustrated over the years in different things I've been involved in, how reactive we are rather than far-seeing. In some areas we can be brilliant, but in other areas we fail dismally. Tim has given me the evil nod. So I'll just finished now, but we have supported through the Just Transition project, and list them in my speech here, 5 very major projects throughout the Midlands. I'm delighted they're all doing well, and will produce roadmaps, pathways, and inspiration for the development of renewable energy here in the Midlands. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kieran, and I'm sorry for cutting you off in full flight. But we need to sort of keep within our time limit, so trying to make sure everybody speaks for 7 minutes and leave plenty of time for questions from the audience here and the audience online. I must say I found that intervention very interesting because on the one hand it was very encouraging for renewable energies, but at the same time you identified the problems that we're facing certainly in Ireland with continuing on the renewable side of things. But I found it very interesting to say that that Europe has woken up to renewable energy and the security of supply, because I think that is pretty essential. And what's happened is it's sort of waking up in a bit of a nightmare, in fact, because of the illegal invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and that has forced us to look at things a bit more quickly. But sorry, I don't want to take up too much time from the questions that we're going to get. So I'd ask our next panellist, who's Dr. Isabella Donnelly, for your intervention, please. Isabella, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tim, and thanks a million, Kieran, for that overview. So this evening I'm just going to chat through my day job and then the work I do outside of my day job regarding renewable energy and sustainable energy communities. So I'm involved with the Sustainable Energy Community Initiative funded by the SEAI, the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, and the programme has been running since 2015, and it's been integral in reaching out to communities who are interested in energy efficiency and renewables and how they can integrate them into their community and demonstrate them for their communities. So as I said, it's been established since 2015. We're at nearly 700 communities at the moment, and it's growing every day. And just to give you a quick overview on what an SEC or Sustainable Energy Community is, so a group of people coming together can be as small as a couple of houses, small street, up to a town, county or region, coming together with the same purpose of looking at energy efficiency and how they can utilise renewables in their area and look at smart energy and how to integrate that. So we take a community through a journey. It's a learn, plan, do journey. So at the start, when a community engages with us, we send circulars, information, answer any questions around energy efficiency and how to save energy at home and how to eliminate waste energy, and then looking at where energy can be sourced on a small domestic scale in community centres, small businesses and communities, etc. And then we provide funding, 100% funding for a community who want to take the next step and look a little bit more in depth at where their energy spend is in the community. So that ranges on the size of the community that we have engaged, ranging from about €10,000 up to €25,000 to investigate exactly where energy is being spent in the community, where it can be saved and where it can be sourced from more renewable sources. And then the community would typically move on to the do stage, where they would engage with the SEAI, and I'd help them, direct them towards grants that are available for the different measures that have been highlighted. And these can range from simple things like there's 80% grants for things like attic insulation, to varying other levels of grants for deep retrofit and looking at insulation of homes and looking at different sources of heating homes and supplying electricity in homes. So that's the SEC overview, and really it's really important, because the way I like to think of it is we're not encouraging energy use reduction, but energy waste elimination is the key thing that we look at with that, and it's the first step really on any journey with looking at sustainable energy. It's eliminating the energy wastage in homes, and it can be simple things sometimes to overcome the wastage in homes. So as I said, that's the day job really. So I'm involved then with communities in my spare time who are interested in engaging then on larger scale renewable energy projects. And this really stemmed from, as we all know, we are incredibly dependent on importing energy into the country. And I always think of it, we're importing energy and exporting masses of money. And I actually looked up the figure today, and it's approximately 5 billion, varying from 5 billion year on year the last couple of years that we're exporting for fossil fuels. And not to mention where the money is going may not be the best places up until very recently. But it's amazing to think we're exporting that money, and we could potentially keep it in our communities by producing our own renewable energy and by saving energy. So the projects I work on would be kind of commercial scale renewable energy projects, so about 5 megawatts, solar projects, and potentially wind projects as well. And it's really the benefits of community-owned projects. It gives the community ownership of the infrastructure. It brings it right home. And it has knock-on effects regards energy efficiency then, because you can really appreciate the hard work the community have put into renewable projects. It's local ownership, local employment, and local benefits, more tangible. You're not exporting that big chunk of money out of the community. You're bringing it back into the community from a community-owned resource. So I think it's going to be a big area going forward, and we have 1 or 2 examples already of communities that have overcome immense hurdles to get onto the grid and get being a part of the transition to locally owned sustainable resources. And I'm going to finish up now, but I just want to finish with this story. I was in Ardnacrusha last week, and I was in absolute awe of what could be achieved. Less than 100 years ago, we were able to have the foresight and the innovation to build a hydroelectric dam. Not long after the establishment of the state, I'm sure money wasn't too plentiful in the country at the time. Yet we had the innovation and the drive to start that project and develop rural electrification. And I just think we have unbelievable resources in this country, unbelievable innovation, experts, and I think we have a bright future that has unfortunately been accelerated by dire straits in the east of Europe. But we have the huge potential there, and it gives me great hope to think that if we can lower the barriers and encourage the acceleration of the innovation we have in the country and look at our resources. I heard on the radio the other day that Ireland could be the Saudi Arabia of offshore wind energy, and I think we have the huge potential, and Kieran hit on it there. If we can just remove some of the bureaucracy and barriers to getting that going, we have huge potential for innovation and in the country. So thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Isabella. I mean, I think there was a direct link between your presentation and Kieran's presentation in that, you know, you were indicating that it could be done and it could be done locally. And I liked your reference to the rural electrification, because I like to think I'm about 25, I'm a bit older than that. But when I was young, you know, there was no electricity in a lot of rural Ireland. You know, people were using paraffin oil to read their lamps, and they were using paraffin oil for their fridges and things like that. It was incredible. So rural electrification really changed Ireland. So, you know, we can make some progress, but as you say, there are local benefits to be achieved from all that sort of thing. So thank you very much for that presentation. So our final speaker in this session is Professor Vincent Conan, who is the president of, I think we call it TUS at this stage.
We'll call it TUS,
okay.
yeah, because we're still in that startup phase.
TUS
So
Small
the TUS Mike Lacknahubra, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Professor Conan.
Thanks very much. Well, the danger of finishing last as speaker is that other people have spoken about what you were going to speak about, but I was doing all right to the very end when Isabel gave her recount, because I live in Ardnacrusha. I live in the shadow of the hydroelectric plant. It's a long shadow if you take it, but it's a couple of 100 yards. And I was just going to comment on a personal level of passing that every day, the impact that it had. You know, there's a story really that energy gets a very bad sort of propaganda at the moment. You know, that energy is, but the impact of that rural electrification, the impact that it had, and it's still operating. Ardnach Crusher still operates and still produces about 2% of the electricity in the country at the moment. Nobody called it renewable at the time back in the 20s. Nobody called it renewable energy. But it has outlasted a large number of the energy plants that went up after that, as Kieran has talked about. So you're very welcome. I'm the President of TUS, yes, and you're all very welcome here tonight. And it's great to have you here, and it's great to have these debates, in the regions where a lot of innovation takes place. So tonight I was going to talk a little bit about, I suppose, what you might expect me to talk about, higher education and sustainability. This TUS is at the centre of a lot of this activity, and we're working very closely on the just transitions as well in this campus, but also in Thurles as well, and other places as well that are affected by the whole issue of affecting just transitions. So as we move now into higher education and sustainability, there is a new strategy, a national strategy on education for sustainable development, and that's going up to 2030. And it is come together under the Higher Education Authority, the Department of Further and Higher Education, and obviously working with the various government departments. So there is a new strategy. I'm not going to go through that strategy today, but I wanted to pick out a couple of things from that. One is around the Human Capital Initiative, an example of that. The Springboard activity, which is a huge activity for TUS, and how we're trying to integrate as well the sustainability development goals across our curricula and across even our campuses. So what I would say, though, initially is we are in the business of education and training and skills. That's our core business. And when you talk about the skills, it's coming from ourselves, it's coming from the further education sector. But our primary business is producing graduates, and we produce a wide range of graduates from here. We produce them at level 6, 2-year programs, level 7, level 8, 9, 10, PhDs, and also apprentices. Hugely important activity, which is now growing both through the craft apprentices and the new apprentices programs as well. And so the skills base is hugely important. As we move through this transition into renewable energies, as we move to energy saving, working with Sustainable Energy Ireland, etc., all of these need a skills base. They need the people coming out with the skills that will make them industry ready. That's our job. That's really our job, and we work in a continuous way with further education, and we make that link. So our primary job is that. Research is another aspect of it. There's lots of research going on as well. So that's part of our game. And then, as well as that, there's the continuous professional development. Michael up here in the audience, who introduced tonight, is head of our Faculty of Continuous Professional Online and Distance Education. So the Springboard program is a lot of training in this country at the moment. We have over, I don't know how many we have now between us all, nearly 2,000 people who are being trained and retrained and made fit for purpose across a number of activities, all the way up to master's levels, undergraduate certificates, diplomas, etc. So we're producing the skills that are needed for that. That's our primary goal, and we need that. Going back to that, the national strategy, I talked about the Human Capital Initiative, but one of the projects out of that is a 7.5 million project called DASBE, and that's the Digital Academy for Sustainable Built Environment, and it is about the skills for the construction industry. So the construction industry is under huge change. There's not enough construction, as we all know, but the type of construction that should go up in the modern era that is energy efficient, and that can meet our energy needs as well is hugely important. So we have DASBE, and Seamus Hoyne, who's sitting in the audience here, is leading that on behalf of TUS. It's a very large upskilling hub, capacity building, as I say, for the construction industry. It goes across 3 areas of energy efficiency, the circular economy, and digital skills. Even the construction industry is facing into the digital skills aspect of things. This is having a profound impact across all aspects of education and skills development, and we're at the edge of that. So skills are being developed, and recently, even with the Heritage Council, DASBE signed an agreement with the Heritage Council to work on older buildings and how to make them fit for purpose in a new energy-saving era. We work with other higher education institutions. I think one of the things from a European movement point of view is Ireland has learned to work together across its higher education institutions. So we're able to bring together real expertise in this space. So that's one of the things that's really happening for us. The green campuses is another aspect of that strategy, the National Strategy for Sustainable Development, and we have a number of green campuses, and Thurles is one of those. The other aspect of that national strategy spoke about was how we are working to look at this integration of the Sustainable Development Goals into our curricula. We can't do all of those at the one time, but we can isolate a number of them. And in Thurles, on our Thurles campus, Seamus is heading an initiative to change the entire Thurles campus onto an SDG campus. And this is about what we do, how we do it, but it's also about the programs that we're doing. DASB is located there in the main aspect of things. So we as education providers have to be aware of what's happening at a global sense, at a regional sense, a national sense, and we're doing that through our integration and trying to ensure that sustainability is embedded in all of our curricula. So we're picking up things, I'm as old as you probably now, lads, apart from you, but sustainability was never part of that educational program. It's now been embedded in that so that the graduates coming through are fully aware of that. So that's happening, another thing that we're trying to do. The just transition, Kieran has spoken very eloquently about that and how we are a key part of that. Other things that are happening in the region that's affected by TUS, and the last thing you spoke about was, both of you spoke about, is the potential for energy, offshore energy. And this is a huge aspect. And in the Shannon Estuary, there's a new task force which is looking at how we might utilize the deep water facility in the Shannon Estuary as a point of contact for taking out of our turbines onto platforms that would be there for offshore wind. And that is the Saudi Arabia when it comes to that, because the wind capacity there, it's much more predictable. Offshore wind is much more predictable than onshore wind. It overcomes those issues as well. When it comes to further technologies which we're working on with other companies, including wave and tidal, those are energy sources that will be of huge impact when they become commercial. They're much more difficult to do than even offshore. But we're working on that. And the wave and wind, wave, of course, wave and tidal. Tidal is predictable. And that's the big thing. So you know when your energy is going to be generated. And wave, we have wonderful wave capacity. So these are new things that will happen over the next 20 years or so, and it will really, even more so than the offshore wind, I don't know what we'll call ourselves when all this capacity comes in. But the thing for Ireland is that we must harness this energy in a way that we're not just primary producers of energy because we have wind and we have wave and we have tidal. It must be because we generate an industry around this on the west coast of Ireland and the regions and the communities that you're talking about and the places where we can produce secondary products such as hydrogen, ammonia and other activities that we will utilise these for the benefit of Ireland and generate a very energy efficient, renewable energy based industries as well. And we will export those secondary products, not the primary products as well. Other things I'd just like to talk about is the chair mentioned that I was CEO of Shannon Development, a regional development company. So my background is in education, research and regional development. It's a passion for me. I'm a West of Ireland person. And we need to be utilising the regions far more so than we do currently in that. So liquefied natural gas, again, gets a lot of bad press. You've got to separate the liquefied natural gas from the frack stuff and the non-frack stuff. But we have ideal capacity again in the Shannon Estuary and planning permission for a liquefied natural gas terminal that dates back to the early 2000s. It never came about because of planning being another aspect. Kieran spoke about planning. I think it's one of the key things that's limiting this country achieving its potential. We would have, I think, apart from the planning laws, we would probably have a liquefied natural terminal at this juncture. It went through the accelerated planning process, Kieran, as well, for a liquefied natural gas terminal, and everything was going beautifully until it required, an offshore or a foreshore license. And a foreshore license, it took 1.5 years just to get the planning permission and another 2 years to get a foreshore license. And that was one of the reasons that the project never really materialized. So look, there's a lot of stuff there getting the eye. I'd like to just again welcome you. There's a lot of things happening from a TUS point of view in the sustainable and energy space, but rest assured that the graduates that are coming through here are more aware what sustainability is about, more aware of that energy side of things, fit-for-purpose graduates being produced, but there's a lot more we can do and will do. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much, President. No, this is going to come as a surprise to the panel, but we're going to take the questions and answers from the podium. The reason is that my colleagues tell me that the people who are watching this remotely are having difficulty hearing us using the other microphone. So we'll take the questions and answers from here. Is this microphone okay? That's okay, is it?
Hello?
Okay, fine, okay. So you can see the questions that are coming up here from the people who are watching this remotely. Some may come from within the group. But can we start off just to make sure that there are no questions for the panel within the auditorium here? Is there anybody who's got a question that wants to put it to the panel? If not, we'll move to the questions. Sorry, I've got one here in the front row. So just wait until the microphone comes because the people watching remotely would like to hear you.
Can you hear me okay? I'm just wondering, it's great to hear about the STG campus in Thurles, but what about all the rest of them?
Well, you have to start somewhere, and Thurles is a great place to start. Well, firstly, it's not just going to be confined to the Thurles campus. It's about generating the activity there, which will be the nexus for our activity in the SDGs, but that will spread out from there. So we want to set up a centre of excellence there, but it will have an impact across all of our campuses. And indeed, we want to see that nationally as well. So it's not just for a TUS activity, it's for a national activity. We're starting there, but that's not the limit of our ambition, sure.
Okay, are there any further questions in the audience? If not, we'll move on to the questions that we have received over Slido. And the first question that I have got is from Seamus Hoyne, and it's a question really for Kieran. So if we pass the microphone to Kieran. Kieran, I'm going to ask you this question. And you mentioned in your presentation that there was €84 million more coming from the European Union for the Just Transition Fund for Ireland. And the question that Seamus has is, what should the priorities be for the next phase of the Just Transition Funds? You gave us an explanation of, what the priorities were for the money that was coming from Ireland, but this money come from Europe. What would the priorities be?
Yeah, there's excuse me, under the European Just Transition Fund, 84.5 million has been allocated to Ireland, with matching funding, incidentally, from the Irish government as well. The territorial plan has been submitted to Brussels, approved by the government and submitted to Brussels. So that's going through the European Commission machinery at the moment. I anticipate decisions will arrive by the end of the year in regard to that, and hopefully 2023. Again, it probably will mirror to some degree the Just Transition Fund in Ireland, in the sense that it will be around enterprise development, green enterprise development. It'll be around enhancing, supporting communities. It will be around infrastructure, and it will be around tourism, heritage, and potential employment opportunities, obviously in the area of renewable energies. What I think here, and I've said it in my last report, was we need to think big now. We need to think on bigger scale, bigger, wider community involvement, in the sense that it's not just going to be the Midlands alone. There will be applications, I think, for other parts of the eastern area of Ireland. It'll be decided upon and run and managed by EMRA, the Eastern Midland Regional Authority. That's the designated authority. So I have more or less said to the Midland Regional Transition Team and to the authorities, local authorities, that they need to start now planning for that kind of scaled activity. I've made a number of recommendations how that could be assisted. But we need to attract in big employers. that have considerable scale of employment. We need to build and we need to expand our business hubs in the region. We need to expand our educational outreach facilities. We need to create, as I said earlier, interconnectivity around public and private transport if we are to take the fossil fuel element out of commuting and the time out of commuting. There are a number of big ideas around from Irish and international investors. Some of them are with the Enterprise Ireland, with the IDA. But Ireland is very attractive. The great attraction of Ireland, again, and has been for the last 25, 30 years, is the skill and education of our young people. We're a very young nation. I'm part of the greying element of it, but we still have a very, very young age, highly educated, highly skilled. We have one of the highest proportions per head of population going to third-level institutions. I think the apprenticeship development is extraordinary. We killed apprenticeships for no good reason 30 years ago. We badly need them now back again. So I think saying is that it's going to be more of the same around the just transition, but on a larger scale throughout, particularly in the Midlands region, but not exclusively so. And we need to make the Midlands good for good things. It has a reputation in a number of industrial areas, in a number of service areas. There's been a lot of local entrepreneurs. I'll just give you one example of small enterprise at the moment, but the potential of it is extraordinary. Real Leaf Farm is a developing small enterprise in Irish investors. In Ballycon, lands leased by Bord na Móna. It has the capacity under hydroponic techniques, environmentally friendly, very little energy use, large water resource use, recyclable, to produce all the types of lettuce we need in this country. Think about that. And I know now they are discussing investment and retail with some retail establishments. But that can be mirrored, like we were talking about earlier, Monaghan mushrooms, Keelings, places like that. We have infinite capacity to become a self-resourcing, sustainable community in all our, let's say, food needs beyond our traditional agriculture.
Okay, thanks very much, Kieran. I must say that I'm getting some very positive vibes from the panel about the necessity for renewable energy in Ireland, and this is all very, very reassuring. I think the next question is probably for Isabella, and it's a question from Maria Brown. And Maria wants to know, how does Ireland intend to encourage rooftop solar panels and other methods of renewable energy? So can you give us your perspective on that? You know, how we should encourage people to start off these micro-generation systems within their own local area?
And the processes are in place at the moment for repayment, and I know it was a bit slow. We were promised the refit and the repayment in a while ago, but it's coming in very shortly, and prices have been promised. So I think that's going to help justify for some people to install solar. I think it's naturally a lot of people are installing rooftop solar at the moment. Years ago, before the incentives were there, that are currently in place now, there were grants, and grants were to encourage people to install the solar from SCAI. But I think it's going to turn into a natural process where they'll justify themselves without the need for a grant to prompt them, and it makes financial sense for a lot of people if they're in the right circumstances for their rooftop solar. So we've had the carrot approach. I think the issues around the cost of electricity is the stick approach now. So I think we're getting there with people uptaking solar, and then the removal of the planning permission requirements and stuff. So I think it's slowly making good progress to a much greater uptake on solar roof.
Okay, super. Thanks so much. I think the next question has got to be for Professor Conan, because because it requires a little bit of a historic answer, in fact. And the question from Anne Jeffers is, was there a conscious decision made not to develop nuclear energy? And here maybe you can remind people about Carnsore Point and all this sort of thing. Professor?
That's a nice soft one. Well, I have to, I will admit, so I'm a chemist by training, so electrochemist, but ultimately I'm a chemist. And so nuclear, to me, has always been an option. It should be back on the agenda because obviously once produced, it doesn't, once put in place, it doesn't produce any more carbon. The issues at that time, like when Carnsore was there, I think a lot of the issues around nuclear have been solved in smaller units. The safety aspects have increased greatly, and the ability to deal with the waste product has been looked at very efficiently. I tell a story about the professor of chemistry and inorganic chemistry in Galway, where I did my chemistry, and he used to say, I go home in the evening and I have a drink out of one of the most dangerous substances known to man. He says, it's lead. And I have my whiskey in a lead glass every evening, and he says, do you know what? It hasn't affected me in any way. Because, of course, and one of his suggestions was, and has been looked at now, is the bearing of this nuclear waste in glass, which is a very hard substance, believe it or not, and then the placement of these, in disused mines, etc., so that the corrosion side of things doesn't become a factor. So I think that. Will we ever get one in Ireland? I'm not sure. I think politically it probably is off the agenda, but I think it's something that a low-scale nuclear plant would be as safe as anything at the moment. But I can't see it happening. But I think it's for the wrong reasons that it's been excluded. And to open the debate again, I think would be good. And if we were able to get beyond the emotion of nuclear energy, we would see that how beneficial it could be. I think, though, we're probably going to outstrip it in Ireland by the developments in offshore tidal and wave down the line, and the timeline that it would. Whenever we're planning for an offshore wind industry, planning for a nuclear energy industry could take decades. So I think within that time, we will have learned how to commercialise wave and tidal as well. So from an Irish point of view, I think it's off the agenda, but I would be a proponent of it.
Okay, so can I just ask you a supplementary question? I mean, we've spoken here quite a lot about renewable sources. And I mean, at the moment, there is a significant proportion of Irish electricity is generated from gas. At what stage do you think, looking forward, do you think that we can have more than half of the Irish electricity generated from renewable resources?
I think there are days when we do that anyway. We've passed that target, but it's the unpredictability of that, in a sense, and is our issue, and storage. So, we haven't overcome the storage issue. Batteries are fine, but that's why you need to generate when you generate that offshore wind and you have a huge excess capacity. You must have the secondary products to convert that energy into a storage way, and hydrogen is very good way of doing that. But you must be able to convert. You're essentially storing the energy in secondary products, and so. Hydroelectricity works because you use the excess, at low levels of usage to pump the water back up again. This is the modern equivalent of that is to generate hydrogen in order to store that energy capacity and to utilize it elsewhere. So I think that's the opportunity, for Ireland is in the production of the secondary products. And the transportation and the export of those secondary products, as opposed to generating the electricity, putting an interconnector, and shipping it across to the UK, and that to me would be like what we did with the agriculture in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and we just were primary producers of agriculture, and we didn't have the added value of the secondary products. So let's not make the same mistakes. Let's be proactive as opposed to reactive, as Kieran would say. But yeah.
Okay, thanks. And just to add to what you've said there, I mean, in her State of the Union address in September of this year, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, mentioned that the European Union was going to invest significantly in hydrogen. So, I mean, I think what you've said there is very interesting, that, we need something to make hydrogen useful. Renewables can do that. I like the idea, I know some people won't like it, but I like the idea of a mixture of generation of renewables plus a little bit of nuclear. But as you say, nuclear may never happen in this country for various reasons, even if it has become very safe.
Could you just say, because gas will be around for some time to come. Like it has to be. For every kilowatt that you produce, you're going to have the capacity to have that produced in gas. Now it's changing. It is changing, but we were always mixing up the argument. Fossil fuels. Gas is the cleanest of the fossil fuels. It's the one that is more abundant. It's the one that we should use because it's a much cleaner carbon-based fuel. But in this drive for renewables, it's like we forget that we have to have the capacity to generate electricity at a switch of a button towards something that is, and the best part of that is, closed-cycle gas turbines. So let's not. Gas is going to be around for a long time, but where you get it and the type of gas that you get, that's the question we should be asking.
Okay, thanks very much. I think we turn back to Kieran to pick up on something that you mentioned in your intervention, this whole question of planning permission. And there were a couple of questions have come in from the public about planning permission. One is from George O'Connor, and George says, how can the current planning system be overhauled to allow air-grid and appropriate renewable energy projects be fast-tracked through the planning process? And then there is another question which is probably aimed more at the European Union, but the question is, can the European Union do something to speed up the planning process? And maybe I might want to come back on that after you have finished your reply. But basically, what is the problem with the planning process, and can we speed it up to ensure that we get what we need on renewable energy?
Yes, I think the government have task force involved in this at the moment, looking primarily at the area of housing, but not exclusively so. It is looking at obviously other areas, and the area of energy supply will arise. That is expected to report in December. So we may have, and it's under the aegis of the Minister of State, Peter Burke, and considerable volume of the work has been done by the Attorney General and his office. So I think proposals will emerge for reform of the planning laws. And of course, this is a balance between public policy, public participation, and environmental issues. It is trying to get that triangle into a way that they function together. At the moment, it's totally dysfunctional. And most of our planning permissions, for one reason or the other, particularly on large-scale projects, end up in the courts, very simply. And when you end up in the courts, you can get variable judgments, on this. It's not an observation sometimes on the judiciary that you should talk more to one another. Secondly, I think in terms of what needs to be achieved, we will not achieve energy security unless this is done. And, we need to be very conscious. That's why I said earlier, and I don't use the word inadvisedly, is an existential threat. If we don't have energy and a security of supply of energy from whatever source, and largely we're talking about renewables at the moment, we will enter a phase by which our economic development will be arrested. Investors will not come to this country unless they have a security of supply of energy. I'm not getting into the data center argument or anything else. We have a kind of schizophrenic relationship with that as well. I see most of us are on mobile phones and on devices. What do you think powers them? or retains the data that we all use so extensively every day in a multiplicity of technology. But also, we need energy so much to produce our food, to ensure we have clean water, and to ensure we have the basics of living. So we need a more rational, intelligent, and we need to be able to listen to each other more. We constantly in these debates, we shout at one another. And then we have the usual NIMBY argument extensively throughout the country. I find it extraordinary that in this country, that an individual in one part of the country can object to the development of a factory or produce a manufacturing facility in another part of the country, and that be heard by our courts and their appeal for whatever reason upheld, and thereby the investment that would bring a lot of sustainable and good employment to that particular region goes by the board. That is not fair, it's not reasonable, and it's not democratic in a society that needs to work together, not operate in a union of one another. We live on one island, we live collectively together, we're part of the European Union. I'll come to that. I think the European Union needs to get real about a few things. I think it needs to get real about what is required within countries to achieve the objectives and policies that have been laid down. I'm amazed sometimes that how some major European countries, I hope this doesn't get you into trouble, Tim, are able to ignore the state aid rules at the blink of an eye when we impose them all the time. And recently, during COVID and during the energy crisis, I have seen major private companies in a multiplicity of areas, energy, aviation and otherwise, get massive subsidies and bailouts from the state, and nobody mentions state aid. And when we tried to do it to preserve Aer Lingus, we got shot down. Look at the mess Aer Lingus is now. That's all I'll say. Been through it all.
Yeah, I mean, thanks very much, Kieran. I mean, Kieran, point taken, but I need to point out that in the context of the COVID pandemic, we actually relaxed the rules on state aid, allowing companies to do things like that. And the Aer Lingus question was a long time before COVID. So, I mean, the thing is that we are able to react to situations, okay, and we do make the changes where we think they're necessary. And indeed, we thought that it was necessary to change the rules on state aid during COVID and post-COVID, because we have the Next Generation EU, which we have the panel here behind us, which sets out to support countries rebuild themselves after COVID. In fact, Ireland didn't get a lot of money under Next Generation EU. It only got less than €1 billion. I mean, it was small in comparison.
Sorry, my point is not within Europe. My point largely is, why does Ireland always have to be the best boy in the class, or girl? I would love Ireland to adopt what the European Union has done in certain countries regarding essential facilities. I agree with you.
I mean, I really hate to disagree with you, Ciara, but, you know, Ireland isn't necessarily the best boy in the class. Every so often, the European Commission decides to take member states to court, and Ireland isn't backward in coming forward with cases before the European Court of Justice. In fact, things like Derry Bryan, for example, has gone to the European Court of Justice, and recently we returned this idea of turf cutting on bogs. So we do impose or try to impose the legislation, and obviously our way of doing that is to bring member states to the Court of Justice. So Ireland isn't necessarily the best boy in the class. It's a good boy, but not the best. I have a question here for Isabella from Aidan Ruan, and Aidan asks, he says, we've heard a lot about actions required from communities, individuals and public policy. So how can we encourage a similar focus on sustainability from large private corporations that no doubt have a part to play? So it's not just, Aidan is saying, it's not just the communities, but also the large corporations. How would you address that?
I suppose the focus on communities is for communities feel the effects of energy price in their own pocket, and as I mentioned in my speech, It's not reducing energy use, it's eliminating energy waste, and that's the key thing. That's a key winner. And from the biggest industry to the smallest household, energy waste is wasted money. So it's focusing on that is where my area of expertise comes in. Large energy users, I suppose, as Kieran highlighted, they bring benefits to the community as well, and there are a lot of incentives there to encourage them to report energy use and reduce energy use and show evidence of reducing energy use year on year. And there's a lot of schemes in SEAI. I don't particularly deal with them, I just know from them from hearing and passing, like Exceed, and there's a lot of schemes that do encourage very large energy users to demonstrate their year-on-year energy use reduction and how they're sustainably looking at their energy use and alternative energy sources. So I don't know how else to respond to the question there.
Okay, thanks very much for that. I mean, we're running out of time now. We've about 2 minutes left in the session, so I think if I give each person just 2 minutes to summarise what we've discussed about this evening and the message that, sorry, there's one question from the audience. I take this question before I turn back to the panel.
Hi, how are you? Alison Hawke, I'm a lecturer here in Toulouse, and I'm also leading the Access to Justice Observatory, which is a project run by the Environmental Justice Network of Ireland that examines EU legislation for compliance with international law. And I'm just curious, hearing the panel talk about rural electrification and that massive transition that took place in Ireland's history, energy history, and it strikes me that with the climate crisis, a similar transformation is needed, a dramatic and ambitious transformation, and that, that the climate and biodiversity crises are linked, that much is clear, and that we can't approach that transformation from the point of view of saying we have to have a deregulatory agenda and that we have to, cut down on the amount of public participation in energy planning, because if we do that, we're going to create a situation where we have bad energy decisions, and what we don't need is more bad projects. We need better projects, we need better decisions, and we need more local input, and particularly in the Midlands. And I'm delighted to see the panel being held in the Midlands, which is one of the most deprived regions historically in Ireland, and one of the regions most affected by the coming transition from the peat and fossil fuel-based economy. So I'm just curious as to how the panel thinks that can be balanced, the need to have good and better planning decisions, and rather than taking the approach of like fast track everything and cut out communities, and communities need to have a voice in the planning system, and I think that is a fundamental democratic right, and it's important not to disregard that as well.
Okay, thanks very much. And that was more a statement than a question, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the panel in their summing up maybe to take your comments into account. But I just want to say to you, it's not by accident that we decided to have this event here in the Midlands, because when we started thinking about where we would go to for these events, obviously the Midlands, or close to the Midlands, was one of the, a definite place to hold something. So if we can start, so just 2 minutes for each of the panel, and maybe if we start with the person whose hall we're renting, the president of TOOS. Could you just give your conclusions in 2 minutes, please, Professor Canal?
Just, I suppose, to the question there. I mean, I don't think anybody's advocating that on planning that you cut out the local communities. I mean, I think that's critical. But what I would be advocating is that you don't, as Kieran has said, as happened in Galway, in data centres, that somebody in Wexford or Wicklow can make a valid objection to that. So the inclusion of local communities should always be there in any planning decision. There's two things that need to happen: limiting to the local community and a speed of decision making. I think that's what we want to see. So it's not about a loss of democracy. It is local democracy, local decision making, local informed decision making, but much quicker decisions. That's I think what I'd be advocating for as well. So just look in 2 minutes. I think the opportunities for so what unfortunately happened with Russia has laid open some of the energy issues facing Ireland, and it has brought them to unfortunately right into the limelight. But what we've seen here tonight, I think, is that we have a heritage in energy innovation, that still persists to this day. We're a highly innovative nation. We have huge opportunities in renewables, huge opportunities that we're not, I suppose, tapping into is probably, but we are not tapping into those at the rate that we should do. And the possibilities of offshore need to be really brought to the forefront. But our ports need to be brought up to speed, in order for that to happen. Investment needs to happen on that. The road infrastructure to allow these things to happen. And again, I go back to this point about the secondary thing, but there's a piece before the primary production. Where are the wind turbines being produced? Where are they? There's none of them being produced in Ireland. So we're going to have them produced in Germany and Spain and Holland, and then shipped across into the deep water and then put up. We should have that industry in Ireland if we're going to do that. Okay? It needs a lot of land in order to do that. And I often tell, on the Ballysimon Road in Limerick in 1986, there was a company producing wind turbines. In 1986, a company was producing wind turbines on the Ballysimon Road in Limerick. And they went out of business. They had no first mover advantage. But imagine if they had managed somehow to survive through that period, what would be happening now in that. So we've got to generate that. So I think we have to look and be very bold in and ambitious in what we have plans for. That matches the ambition in the 1920s of being one of the biggest projects in Europe. That is the level of our ambition that needs to be. I don't see that in government. I don't see that in the departments. I see a fear of innovation. I see a lack of ability to get things done. De-risking, so they don't want to take the low risk opportunities, but don't take anything that might be high risk. Planning facilitates this low risk approach. Planning is now an ability to say, oh, we'd love to see that happening, and knowing that it can't happen for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. So it's become a feature of a departmental decision making that will say, well, we can just about back this but because we know it's never going to happen. So we really have to get rid of our archaic 19th century planning laws, get a fit for purpose and sharp planning laws, and make this work towards a very large, ambitious project that will deliver incredible opportunities, both in the way we produce that electricity, the production of that electricity, and the usage of that electricity. That will make every rural community in Ireland vibrant. And regional development will be at its peak. So, can we get that? We can, but we're going to have to look at ourselves in a very fundamental way if we're going to do that. And the last thing I would say, and it goes back to this point of why I clapped when Keir talks about our compliance. If there were two things I would change in the country at the moment, one is planning, and the other is the myth of value for money through procurement processes that exist in this country at the moment. It is unbelievable. Public sector procurement is holding back this country as well. So, apart from, I could go on, but I'm going to stop.
Listen, I think you've gone way over your 2 minutes, but I can see that there's passion there, there's belief there, and it's so difficult to put that passion and belief into 2 minutes. So therefore, you're absolved from going over your time. Isabella, please.
So I'll just touch on that point again as well, and what I advocate regards community ownership and community participation in big projects. It's a real good way of getting awareness in the community and bringing the community along with you on the journey. And I think it's such an immense solution. And I've seen it with projects, again, not so much the planning, but the planning isn't straightforward either for projects I've been involved with. But it's the negativity and the barriers finding the grid infrastructure is not there. Who's going to pay for the upgrade of substations? It's a catch-22. It's a chicken and egg, and people don't want to step forward and pay for upgrades. So we have so many resources there ready to go, gotten through the planning position, but there's just no get up and go from government and from semi-state bodies, I won't name them. But so we really, really do need just a kick, planning and from our infrastructure end of things to get it going. I looked at the AirGrid dashboard there during the summer just to see a perfect day for solar energy, amazing day for solar energy, large-scale solar energy. We were producing 80% of our electricity from gas. So we were a warm day. We were essentially burning gas, producing waste heat to cool people down. I couldn't get my head around it. Like, why? We've only one solar farm, large-scale solar farm, energized in the country at the moment. Like, and there's lots of them waiting in the queue to get energized. We need to give the kick and not staying in the safe place anymore. So I think I've missed lots, I'm sure I wanted to get across, but I'll leave it on that point.
Yeah, thanks very much, Isabella. That's always the way, isn't it? 2 minutes really is quite short. Kieran, do you think you can stick with 2 minutes?
Oh, definitely not. No, first of all, just to reply to you, at the heart of all my reports is community engagement, consultation with the community. The line then has to be drawn between where the community support and then the individual jumps out of that democratic process to object. I think that's the fundamental problem. I have the same creed occur as Vincent has regarding chairman of state boards and I'm on state boards. Procurement governance would drive you demented. It's an extraordinary inhibitor to change momentum and ingenuity. Nobody takes risks anymore. Nobody takes risks. I'm an optimist by nature. That's always been my training. It wasn't a dispute I didn't think could be resolved for my naivety anyway, but they largely were. I think humanity has an infinite capacity to create. It has an infinite capacity to genius. And I've just looked over the last number of years, even during COVID, the capacity of science and technology to challenge one of the most fundamental threats we had on a worldwide pandemic and come out the other side has been truly extraordinary. But the amount of development that has taken place in science and technology at the moment is moving us forward at quantum levels. And I believe that, if applied also to the energy sector, will get us out of this crisis we are facing and our relationship as a planet with the world and with the outer space that influences. 1% of sunlight shining in the Sahara Desert, if harnessed, would power the world. Extraordinary. And we look at the Sahara Desert as this barren place that people traverse on camels. The second thing, we need to get over our prejudice around these. By 2050, it is estimated that hydrogen will satisfy 25% of our power needs. I just think we need to be more creative. We need to be risk takers. We need to try, experiment, and if we fail, try again. On nuclear power, I'm just a bit agnostic a little bit because I have another conflict of interest. I marched against nuclear power as a student down to Carnsore one weekend. So we cannot always deny our own history, Vincent, of these matters. Anyway, it'll be found out in the modern world. But I do believe that within Ireland, we have this capacity to bounce back from extraordinary events, largely negative. The famine. Then in my period of time, the recessions, the dot-com burst, the 2008 housing collapse and what it did to our bank. Look where we are now. We're almost at full employment. The population is going to get back to pre-famine levels within the next 10 years. The problem is to be able to supply the energy to meet their needs and capacity. So, look, it's not all glim. It's not all darkness. There is an extraordinary amount of light. But we need to be honest with ourselves and challenge the inhibitors to innovation and change. And I do agree with Vincent, that is largely within the system we elect to govern us. We need to look hard at that. That sometimes it doesn't always need to be the civil service. It needs to be outside of it. I'm a firm believer in task force that are timelined and sunset. Project, problem, solution, implementation. It's the old SWOT analysis. It hasn't changed in business or anything. But we can do it. I've no doubt we can do it. We're already starting to do it. We are being good boys and girls in the class, Tim, in certain areas. And what I would like to see is that we continue to do that. And that we don't get caught in the endless debate. I've almost stopped listening to RTE because I can't take the negativity anymore. I just can't take it. It starts at 7 o'clock in the morning and finishes at 11 o'clock at night. And I happen to be retired and I do a lot of work at home. I've gone over to the BBC. It's more interesting. Where else would you get 3 prime ministers in 6 weeks? 4 chancellors. And I'm looking forward now to how King Charles performs. Been waiting for this for 50 years. So let's enjoy it too, folks. Thank you.
Listen, folks, it's been a fascinating discussion, and I wish that we had another hour and a half to keep talking, because I get this sense of optimism from each of you on the panel. I think it's refreshing. I think it's great. I started off by talking about the bad things that were happening in the world, about Russia invading in Ukraine, and yet each of you in turn have come and said, yeah, but there is a solution. Yeah, we can do this. Let's be positive. Let's be optimistic. So I just want to thank all of you for your contribution here this evening. I want to thank the audience that we have here in Toos, and I want to thank our audience who are watching remotely at home. Apologies to the audience at home, because I know there were sound issues at certain times during this debate, but I hope that you still managed to grasp the essence of it, which, as I say, is positivity. And finally, thank you to the Toos University for hosting us here, and of course our friends in European Movement Ireland who put all of this together for us. So there are just 2 events left. We're having one event in UCC in Cork and one event in Sligo, both of which are happening next month. So if you're interested in watching online to see what other distinguished panellists are going to say on this subject, I would invite you to have a look at our website, euireland.ie. And finally, I want to say thank you to the colleagues from the Europe Direct Centres for having come this evening, to give you all the information about the European Union. So they've got the colleagues from Galway and the colleagues from Athlone have come today, and anything that you want to know about the European Union, they will be able to tell you. And they even have a few freebies that you can take away with you. So all that's left for me to do is to say thank you so much, and safe home, and until the next time. Bye-bye.